Well, let me just say where we are and what the day is and so on that.
Okay.
So we're here at Shirley Johnson's abode, 105 Rittenhouse Commons in Bayfield, Wisconsin, on November 13th, Friday the 13th, 2009. And thank you, Shirley, for sharing your stories with us.
Oh, it's fun to have you here.
And Bobby Nelson is here off camera, chiming in whenever. So let's just follow the trail from, where were you born and raised, Shirley?
Oh, I was born out in the town of Russell, and April 23rd, 1923, and had a midwife deliver me, Mrs. Ben Leonards. And a few days later, when the postmaster could get through on our, I think it's County K?
Yep, County K.
The Sand Bay Road.
Mm-hmm.
That road would get so muddy. The postmaster couldn't drive out there or get the horses out there even on that muddy road. And so luckily this midwife came in and here I am, but nevertheless Dr. Pickett is the one that came.
Okay.
And I think he had to leave the same day. And all things did not go all that well for my dear mother, and she had major problems after. Nevertheless, I survived, and here I am.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where were you in the family? How many kids? And
I'm the only one.
you're the only child?
Yes.
That's unusual
Yes,
for that day.
yes, yeah. I get kind of jealous sometimes when I see some of my friends with all their brothers and sisters, and they're talking about something special. And I happen to know about this too. And I would like to chime in and say, well, we did this, but I have nobody to back me up on it. So I just let it go.
Shirley, your mom and dad. Tell me a little bit about them.
My mother was Victoria, England, and her father had the Bayfield hardware store, Olaf England hardware store. And she was the bookkeeper for him. And regarding my dad, Sebastian Feldmeyer, his folks had a dairy farm out there. In fact, they farmed that Mary and John Murado, or is it Larry Murado?
Larry Murado's place?
Their place. That was the Feldmeyer farm. And they had, it was a dairy farm. I don't know how many cattle they had. But they would bottle the milk and bring it into Bayfield and sell to the Bayfield residents. That's how my dad met Mother.
Okay.
Delivering milk to their house. And
where was the England home in Bayfield? Do you remember?
Tula Larson's house is Grandma and Grandpa's.
Okay.
And his brother John England is the house right next to the Baptist church up here.
Okay.
And then as for the Feldmeyers, there were 5 of them. Daddy had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. And the one that continued on with dairy farming would be his older brother, Leonard. And Leonard had his creamery in Bayfield that after the Feldmeyer farm doing the dairying quit. Leonard kept on, and the rum line in Bayfield, that was the creamery in Bayfield. And so my Uncle Len carried on there. I don't remember how many years, but then he would move to Ashland, started a dairy there, and I think it's right where the Pure Dairy is in Ashland.
Okay.
As for Daddy's brother, Bob Feldmeyer, he had the little house next to Larry and Mary Murado's place. And there's a big field there, and he built a huge barn, which was a tavern, and he had dances upstairs. But something happened over a period of maybe only 3 years, and it burned down.
Mm.
But on Larry and Mary's farm, there was also a big barn where they held barn dances, and that was regularly done every week.
My dad has told me stories about how much fun they had out there at those things, and it's wonderful I thought he was really kidding around with me there when he said we used to go out to Feldmeyer's there, and they had a lot of fun on the top of that barn, I guess, and things like that. It's interesting.
Who played at those dances? Do you remember?
People with guitars and violins. Who they were, I don't know.
Were they like the Hardanger fiddles and
Yes.
Norwegians?
Yes.
So they'd have those Norwegians in there.
With accordions also.
Yeah.
Let's see. My mother was one of the first, well, not the first lady, along with perhaps 10 other ladies that started the Sunnyside Club. And that is still going to this day, and I'm a member of that.
What is the Sunnyside Club?
Oh, it's just a gathering of, at that time it was a gathering for the town ladies to have coffee and cake or whatever, and even bring the children. And I can remember after school, I would go to Mrs. Garman's, or I would go to Mrs. Kelly's, because Sunnyside Club was there, and then Mother would be there and take me home. That was always, and I remember I always hoped that Mrs. Garman would bring her chocolate cake. That was fun.
You mentioned Leonard and Bob. There's another brother in there?
No,
Okay.
there were 2 ladies, Frances Walksmith. Her husband,
Okay.
Louis Walksmith, was a postmaster for many, many years. And then the other one, Josephine, she married Hugo Walksmith. Now, these 2 Walksmiths are not related at all. But Hugo Walksmith was the brother to Henry Walksmith.
H.J.
H.J. And they had started the lumber company down here. But the 2 had a slight problem, so Uncle Hugo said, I'm leaving, and he went out to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and started a lumber company there. And
I read about that in the Progress where, the paper just said Hugo and Josephine took off and they went out west. And I kind of wondered, they never did say too much about any of the particulars in the article, but so there was a little squabble in the Watchman family.
Yeah, something, I don't know what it was.
That happens.
What else can I tell you?
And where were your parents from?
Right from this area.
They were born here too.
Yes. My mother was born in Ashland, and my father, oh no, I beg your pardon, my father was born in Tomah, Wisconsin.
What year did they come to the Northland up here? I know they were here in 1911 or 1912 for sure. I know that they were here, but they may have been coming even earlier.
I do not know when they came up. I know they had a big farm down in the Tomah area, and sold that farm, came up here and bought this one, and also Grandpa bought the first Studebaker around here, as I remember.
Grandpa England?
No, Grandpa Fellmeyer.
Okay.
And was quite proud of that fact. So the story was told to me. I don't remember
And
that.
where did Grandpa Feldmeyer, what country did he immigrate from?
I cannot tell you. I do not know, John.
You don't know. Well, you said you were Swedish.
Yes, I'm Swedish.
Are you 100% Swedish?
No. I'm half German and
Yeah.
half Swedish.
Feldmeyer sounds like a German name.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Okay. So England was the Swedish.
Swedish part. Yeah.
Okay.
In the Bayfield Progress is that Olaf England store. Where was that located?
Joanne's.
Okay, so that's exactly Joanne's Scandinavian
That's right.
Furnishings. And that was also one of the first hardware stores in Bayfield, I believe, that was built in the 1870s or something like that. Okay, so that's where the old England building is.
Yes.
I see a lot of fantastic ads that your grandfather had run in the old Progress. I'll have to bring
I'd
those
like
along.
to see that.
They sold everything in there from stoves to fur coats,
yes,
I think. And,
yes, they did.
It must have been quite the place.
I know that my aunt Helen Sales had some beautiful goldware, plates and that. Only it was goldware that she got through the hardware store. So they got a variety of things there.
Was your grandfather retired by the time that you would have been able to walk into his store at all?
No, he wasn't retired then.
Do you have any recollections of
No.
walking in there?
No, but I have recollections of walking around the sidewalk over at Tula's.
Okay.
Because when I would come from Sunday school, I'd go to Grandma and Grandpa's and wait for Daddy and Mother to pick me up. And so I can still remember walking that sidewalk with my Grandma England.
Yeah.
That's all I can remember regarding them.
Did they start the hardware store, or did they take it over from somebody? Do you know?
They did not build that building. Do you know who built it, Bob?
I want to say that was the old John McLeod building. John McLeod was I think had the first hardware store in Bayfield in about 1858, and that's one of the. I want to say it was on that corner, but it could have been John McLeod, or Andrew Tate could have built.
I think that name ring. I'm not sure. You'd have to look.
Tate built a few buildings. His building's on the waterfront down there, but.
Well, I know Grandpa bought it from that person, and I gave the title that Grandpa had to the heritage. So
It's
you
down
have
there.
it in the archives up there somewhere.
So you would be related to Johnny England.
That's
That'd
right.
be your cousin.
John England was my uncle.
Okay.
John and Emma England. That was Aunt Emma and Uncle John, and he was a lumberman. Did some heavy lumbering.
Mm-hmm.
And they had, well, maybe you remember the Soleys. That was their daughter, Esther Soley.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there was Margaret
England.
Margaret England Miskell, and Gladys England Butterfield. But Gladys got cancer, passed away at probably the age of 28 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was Buddy. George.
Yeah, George, South Twin, and
Yes.
Carl Moe and George
Yes,
England
yes.
when they built the trolling business operation there at South Twin. Wonderful story just in that family. Now, you're also probably then cousins to Chuck Ludwigson, because wasn't his mother, was she in England too?
No,
Okay. Maybe she was a miller.
I'm not familiar with them.
Okay.
Mother had Amelia Hanson, Mrs. Henry Hanson, H.J.S. Hanson,
Okay.
and they had two children, Lillian McCormick in Iowa, and Dr. Kermit Hanson.
Okay, gotcha.
And then there was Irene England Sinclair.
Mm-hmm.
They had the twins, Bobby and Bertie, and then you remember Bill Sinclair, maybe,
Yep, Billy Sinclair.
and Joey.
Mm-hmm.
And my Aunt Helen Sales, her husband was John Sales, Johnny the piano player.
All right. Do you remember anything about Johnny?
Yes, I remember sitting on his lap, and he was trying to teach me how to play the piano. And
I guess he was
thought
quite.
he was very talented.
There's an art. There's one in Elmer's book. There's a story about Johnny Sales
Okay.
and some of his music.
Yes, I've read that.
Yeah, so we've kept him alive in the book anyway, also too. So the Sales family, Bud Sales. Do you remember Buddy
Oh,
Sales?
I remember Bud. He and I think Bernie Moe
Mm-hmm.
had the restaurant right next to the Blue, not the Blue Ox, Black and White, George Jonas's.
Okay.
There was a little restaurant there, and they started it.
Now, where was that?
Well, it's Mary Rice's
Bates Bar.
Bates Bar.
Ah,
What does she call the place?
I think it's still Bates.
Okay. Well, it's the little building right next to it, John. That was the restaurant run by Bud.
Yeah. Okay.
And Bertie Moe.
Mm-hmm.
A long time ago, right next to it was a little building
Mm-hmm.
that I think was Andrew Drakenberg's tailor shop.
Yeah. Got it. As you go down the row, a little down Broad Street, a little further, there was Drakenberg's. I kind of remember that building, and then there was Wrighton's gas station there. Was that right next to it, or was there a building in between there?
I think there was a building in between there, but I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, it looks like that. You know, the trees are like 60
Yeah.
years old now.
Right.
And then there was the First and Last Chance bar on the corner there.
That perhaps was it a bar or was it a boarding house?
I think.
Raymond's had a boarding house. It was either on that corner or the one right where Mary Rice has her egg toss.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure, but in there.
Tell me a fun story about your dad.
Oh, Daddy was full of mischief. He was full of jokes, and he liked to tease the little kids especially. And this one day he sent a little boy up the street to get him a left-handed monkey wrench.
Oh.
Only a left-handed one. Oh, silly little things like that. But Daddy was fun, and he liked to make people happy, and he had such a hearty laugh. You could hear my father laugh above everybody else. And of course he would haul wood from his lumbering area out on Highway 13, which is located right. Do you know Leo and Lee Coombs?
Yes, I do.
That's the property Daddy had. He had over 100 acres of timberland there.
Oh boy.
And he had fellows, he built a road up to the top of the hill, and he had fellows cutting down the trees and skidding them down to this road that he built. And then he'd take the truck up there and they'd load these logs on, or the smaller, after cutting them down, putting the smaller ones on the truck so he could bring it down. Then down right next to the road is where they did the sawing and the cutting of split wood and chunk wood.
Okay.
And he would deliver this into Bayfield, and he had probably 6 or 7 fellows constantly in the woods cutting for him.
Oh boy.
And I can remember going with Daddy, and he would put the tail end of the truck down, and I'd stand on that tail end, and he would throw split wood up to me, like maybe 3 or 4 pieces. And we had a little system going where he would throw it up to me, and I'd catch it, and then he showed me just how much a cord of wood was in the truck. We had a line, and he said, now we're going to give another quarter. He said, always give a cord and a quarter. He says, Shirley, always give good measure. I remember that.
So this was all firewood then?
Yes. I remember, too, I was always so happy because Mother would pack us a lunch. And then around noon, he would make about 6 or 7 trips into Bayfield every day. And around noon, we'd stop back out at the woodlot because he had a little shanty there where he would rest the horses and feed the horses, and then the men would come down and have their lunch there, and so we did too. And I thought this was so fun. And then at the end of the day, he'd stop and let me go up to Ole Holmes Drug Store and buy some candy.
Where's Ole Holmes Drug Store?
Xanadu.
Okay, where the Xanadu is right now, that
Right.
was Ole Holmes Drug
Yes.
Store. That's for the record.
Yeah.
So people will know that.
Right.
What a fun story. How about your mom? Was she full of the
Mother-
Dickens too, or was she
No,
pretty strict?
Mother was exactly the opposite. Very quiet, quite a Bible reader.
What was her faith?
She was Presbyterian.
She's Presbyterian, and Sebastian was Catholic?
Catholic.
Oh boy.
So, when I told you that I was stay at Grandma's place after I had Sunday school, Mother would go to her church and she would get out about noon. Daddy would go to his church and he'd get out about 10 o'clock. So we all gather at Grandma's to wait until all the services were done so that we could then go home.
Were you brought up in the Presbyterian church?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm on their cradle roll and was Presbyterian until I was a teenager.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then mother became Catholic at that time at probably age 40.
Interesting. So she, the evening's quarrels about which church was the best was ended then and there, right?
Well, they had their disputes, I'll tell you that. But one thing, at the end of the day, like my Aunt Amelia and Uncle Henry, the Henry J.S. Hanson family, they would come, all of the relatives would come out to the farm an awful lot. Mother was a wonderful cook, and of course was food galore, and so we'd come out and have dinner. Well, so then the three of them would kind of, shall we say, gang up on Daddy,
Oh,
the Catholic. But they would say this: now we never will leave in any type of quarrel or heated discussion. We always end up happy at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and go home happy. And this was true. That's how they handled their differences. And of course, Mother would have to find out the answers to questions that Daddy would stump her on. So she would write to even Washington, D.C. for information.
Really?
Yes.
She
So
get it
life
down.
goes on.
The life in the town of Russell. You're a little girl out there.
Oh.
You're 7, 8 years old. Tell me a recollection of the earliest thing you can remember on that farm. What do you see as you're talking now? Do you see a barn? Do you see a tree? Do you see chickens? What do you see on that
What hangs in my memory, I must have been maybe 2 years old. 3. On our farm, just a bit a ways, was a little hill, and at the bottom of the hill, Daddy had dug a huge water hole. And we had a creek running through there. So it was nice, clear water. Mother would go down and get that water to do her wash. And there was a plank across to the other side. And so she would take me on occasion and tell me, now don't you ever walk on that plank. And I remember distinctly running across on that plank and Mother behind me screaming, Shirley? I don't know what she said. And I can remember climbing up the hill, which was slippery, and falling. That's all I can remember. So that's my earliest.
Tell us a little bit about life going to school at Carver.
Well, I had to walk every day back and forth. It's a mile down to Carver School. And
the Carver School, for all practical purposes, was on the intersection of K and Highway 13, right now across from the BRB dump site there. But it was in that corner, and where the town of Russell garage is now. So, but it's a wonderful, wonderful little school. Tell us a little bit about your friends in school. I know that the Kovaceviches were there, and tell us a little bit about what it was like in that building.
oh, it was a beautiful building. We had a one room, with all 8 grades in there. We had a nice little library to the side. We had a cloakroom, and then we had a real nice basement beneath. I can remember in the one year, probably my 7th grade, in the winter time, Daddy we'd all move to Highway 13 because you could not get up the clay road of County K.
Yeah.
And he had to make the deliveries every single day. So we would move in the fall and stay until spring and rent a home from someone on Highway 13.
Okay.
One year it was Bill Gorman that we rented from, and then the other time was Stan Stevenson's sheep farm.
Yeah, okay, Ed Stevenson's place.
Yes, and I can remember of walking from the Stevenson farm down the highway to Carver School, and we had a coal bin at Carver School. And I would crawl in that coal bin and around the side on beams and jump down on the stairway and light the furnace every day for our teacher in the wintertime. I thought that was fun.
Tell me who
She
your
was
teachers
pleased.
were there.
My first 3 years, I had Mrs. or Miss Elvira Nelson. The next year I had Miss Pat Gorman. That would be Scotty Moran's wife.
Okay.
And then the next year I had Mrs. Birkland. That's what
my
year?
aunt.
Yeah. And then the next year was, my 8th grade. She was the one I built the fires for.
It'll come back in a second.
I lost it.
Yeah.
So it was grades 1 through 8 out there,
Right.
with one teacher for all the grades?
Well, those 3 teachers.
Oh, there
Yeah,
were 3.
one teacher for each grade, but they would stay about 3 years and they'd be transferred, and then you'd have another one come in. Yes, one for all 8 grades.
How many kids in that school would you guesstimate?
Probably 25. Wasn't very many.
Did they practice the older kids helping teach the younger kids in those
No.
days? So the teacher would just have command of the whole class
The whole
and
thing.
have different sets of work plans for each child.
Right, right.
They had a pretty tough job in
Yes,
those
they
days.
did. We used to house one of the school teachers, Mrs. Elvira Nelson, we housed. Oh, and then later on we had, Bernice Stark,
Sure.
but I can't remember having her for a teacher, but I remember of her being with us, and she was a wonderful lady. I love Bernice.
Do you have any recollections? Now I'm just satisfying myself here. Tell me a little bit about my aunt as a teacher in your school, Ranghild Birkland.
Oh, she was real good. I don't remember anything in particular, just that I did fine with her, and she was very kindly. Seems to me she brought her little son out every once
Ronnie.
in a while.
Yeah,
Ronnie, okay. Yeah.
Good.
Nice lady.
Okay, the Carver School. Some of your, who was your best friend in the Carver School?
Dorothy Gouch.
Dorothy Gouch.
And Dorothy just lived up the street, up the roadway from me. Her father built their home, and it's all of stone, and it's where John Leask lives. So, and I can remember going down in that basement because her father had a little artesian well in the basement, just a tiny one. And her mother would make root beer. And we'd have there would be root beer bottles in this little bin where the artesian well was, and we'd have root beer. I don't know what else you would like to know about.
I'm just thinking about that school, and it had a big flagpole there, a big bell on top. It was a first-class school.
Yes, I know the bell went to Dorothy Gouch, and she lived in Ashland, and she had it. But Dorothy now is in a nursing home, and I've lost track of Dorothy.
Okay.
So this would, by now we're in the 30s somewhere, right?
Yes.
And you say you were
Yeah.
born in 1923?
Yes.
And so times were tough out there.
Oh, yes. But I think because we had the cows, we had probably 3 cows. And Daddy had a raspberry patch. You know, he didn't have that much time for real farming with the wood business and that. So, nevertheless, we had a few raspberries and a few strawberries, and we had beans. We had all the things necessary. Mother was wonderful at canning. And Daddy was a great violator of shooting deer. And I remember one time he went up on top of the Woodlot Hill, and we had Morse Brissette, who was a very wonderful hired man that lived right with us. He was like a brother to me. And he and Daddy went up shining at nighttime and saw a deer. And Daddy shot 1 shot. And they got over there, and there were 2 deer there.
Oh.
And so
We can stop and
wait till that gets through.
Morris Brissette.
Oh, he was a fine hired man. He had his own room at our house. He would stay Monday through Friday nights with us, and then the weekend he would be at home in Redcliffe.
Would he be like a brother to Henry Brissette? And
Yes, they're brothers, Henry and Ted and Mike Brissette. Daddy had all of them work for him. They
Okay.
were wonderful men.
Big, strong boys in their day?
Well, Morse was not that big and strong, but he was so dependable. Like if we wanted to go to Duluth, many times we'd go up to Duluth in the truck and we'd stay overnight. Morse would milk the cows in and keep the home front going. And this would be on a weekend, but Morse would do it. And it was wonderful. So we liked to go up to Duluth, get a hotel room, and then we would go from one show to the other. We loved the movies.
Oh,
And
I
so
see.
this is what we would do.
That was a big vacation type
Oh,
thing.
yeah. And we'd do it every once in a while. It was just a fun thing to do. And I can remember this Cascade Hotel. And when we went down into the dining room, they just handed you the book where the girls write down what you order. And Mother would have to write down what we wanted. And this was so different, you know. It should be the waitress doing that, but no. They handed you the booklet and you put down, she'd tell you what it was. Maybe she couldn't write or something.
Yeah, could have been a foreigner that just couldn't
I don't
do
know, but that hangs in my memory.
it. Interesting.
Was Highway 13 built then?
Yes,
You go there to Duluth by Highway 13.
I guess so, yes.
Must have been a muddy road or.
Oh, yes. But
Gravel
see,
road.
Daddy had the truck, so no problem.
Yeah.
So up
Big-
you went.
Big problems on County K, though. That was
Horrible.
horrible. And I can remember as you go down K, as you leave Carver School, there was a huge dip, and the railroad trestle went across it.
Okay.
And I can remember Daddy's truck sliding this way and that way all down the hill, and I'd be so afraid. And then he'd try to get speed to go up on the other side.
Get a run for it.
Well, he couldn't
Yeah.
because of the greasy
Yeah.
red clay.
Yeah. Did you that road go all the way to Little Sand Bay in those days?
Yes.
Did
And-
you ever do a little fun days out at Little Sand Bay or anything?
Yeah, we went out there every once in a while. And we'd also go down to Roy's Point,
Okay.
and that was fun for me to go
The
swimming.
Brickyard Creek area?
Yeah.
See, by the time when I was a kid, that had all grown over and nobody even knew all the big things that were at Roy's Point prior to this marina and things. Do you remember the Brickyard Creek at all?
I just remember Daddy driving down there, and there was a lot of foliage all on either side as we drove down. But there was a little hill that we could have a picnic on, and I could run down the hill and swim
I see.
or play in the water. I didn't know how to swim. Yeah, I remember that. That was fun.
Did you get out to any of the islands then?
No. We weren't boaters like the nurses and the Nelsons. And
Yeah, they weren't just fishermen, they're commercial fishing
yeah.
families. Different farming families, commercial fishing families, business people were in the community then, as there is now.
That's right.
So now you're in Carver School and you're getting through the 8th grade. Where's your next stop in life after that?
Next stop was DePadua High School. I went my first year of high school at DePadua. Took up home economics, and that was offered there. It wasn't here in Bayfield. Then we moved to Bayfield, and my father became policeman and was Hermie Sense was the one that taught Daddy how to be a policeman.
Oh, really? Old Hermie, okay.
And I don't know what Hermie did. He maybe, I don't know.
Herman before, in his earlier days, he had a funeral home in Bayfield.
Oh, that, yes.
And
I
he also
remember that.
he also sold like furniture.
I didn't know that,
yeah.
but I remember the funeral home.
Yeah, so he did a little bit of everything.
Okay.
When they had a death in the lumber camps, they'd bring him in and he'd do the autopsy and he did everything in those days. So, but anyway,
Where was that first high school? That first.
The same place that it is now.
DePadua, is that you're
Oh,
talking?
DePadua
DePadua,
is in
yeah.
Ashland.
Ashland.
Yes, and we lived in the Wilmarth building. We had an apartment there.
Oh,
And the Wilmarth building was right above the depot.
Okay. Okay,
Not the depot, the bus station, bus terminal.
Oh, the old Greyhound place there.
Greyhound.
All right, gotcha.
Then came to Bayfield, and like I say, Daddy was policeman.
What year
And-
did you come back to Bayfield then?
39.
1939.
And let's see, Daddy was a policeman. Oh, and I remember there was no one to help, as Hermie didn't have anyone to help. That's how Daddy got started. And so in the summertime, when it was real busy for Daddy as policeman, the city allowed him to have a couple of the taller senior boys take over, like say from 2 to 4 in the morning, or
Oh, really?
so that Daddy could get some sleep.
Huh.
And then too, if he went for a cup of coffee or something like that at those weird hours, he'd call Helen Cease, or was Mrs. Harrison, who was the telephone operator.
Johnny Harrison's mother?
Right. And tell her, I'm going to be here. If you need me, call this number. Or if he was at, I don't know, Grunky's or wherever, so that if they needed him quick like that's where he would be.
So that's in 1939. How big was the city of Bayfield then? Were there quite a few more people that you
There
remember?
was more people. Yes. I don't remember any more.
Remember any numbers on the signs coming into Bayfield?
Yeah.
You remember it used to be 12, 69, and 8?
The eights I remember distinctly, but I don't remember any more than that. Bob.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So the town was a little larger. They had one police officer with a couple young guys from the school helping out.
That's right.
Okay. Were there a lot of taverns and a lot of wild goings on in Bayfield that you remember?
In the summertime, yes. There was, probably 5 bars that I remember of. It would have been Junior Yeska's, which is Mary's place now. And there was the Blue Ox. Well, that was when the flood was. And then there was the Rum Line, which used to be Troller's Inn.
Which was the creamery.
Which was the creamery. And then there was Morty's, of course.
Bayfield Inn.
Bayfield Inn, that's right. But that was more like a supper club.
Yeah, very nice in there.
Yeah, and when the restaurant would close down, the bar was closed too.
Who owned the Bayfield Inn back in those days? Were the Okerstroms there yet?
Roy Okerstrom.
Okay.
In fact, in my senior year, I can't remember now. We lived right in the hotel.
Oh, really?
Daddy was the maintenance man as well as police, and Mother was a bookkeeper, and I was the waitress.
Really? Did that belong to Bert Bracken before?
It was, and then when he passed on, let's see, the Brackens are related some way to Freddie Walksmith.
Yeah. She's a Walksmith girl. I think Mrs. Bracken was a Walksmith.
Oh, that's how it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Possibly. I'm pretty sure.
I don't remember any more on that part.
So you're about 1940. You're 16, 17 years old, I guess.
And the fun part was being in the band. I loved my saxophone, my E-flat saxophone.
What band was that?
In fact, I won a blue ribbon over the district. We had to compete in several areas, and then you wound up in Ashland as the district area. And so I won a blue ribbon there for a solo.
Really?
And it was Mr. Clamp that was the band instructor, band leader. And when I was working at the Heritage, one day a gentleman came in with his wife, and he happened to mention his name was Klatt. And so I said, you wouldn't know Irwin Klatt. Oh, that's my father. So we had a nice chat about Dad, my band teacher, and he gave me his dad's telephone number, and I called Mr. Klatt.
Oh, yeah.
And he sounded just like back when he was teaching me.
Oh, really?
And now I had not talked to him this year, but he would have been 99 this year.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that was so great to make that connection. Just thrilled me so much.
Was your band in high school in those days, was it a marching band, or
It
was
was
it
a
a show band, or?
It was a marching band.
What did-
We marched in Ashland, I can remember that, and we had purple capes.
Oh,
I can't remember what the underside was, what the color was, but the top side was purple. I can remember that.
who was the best musician in the band other than yourself?
Oh, come. Don Adney.
Okay.
He was a clarinet player. He could play anything. He was just out of this world with that inner rhythm. He was fantastic.
Yeah, the beat. So you're a sophomore in high school there?
Well, this would take me to my junior year.
Okay.
Junior and senior year.
All right.
Senior year, I only got a red ribbon.
Now,
Bummer.
What about boyfriends during that time?
I didn't have to, everybody was my friend, really. And, well, I guess Jack entered the picture then quite a bit.
Uh-huh. Tell us a little bit about your husband, Jack.
Oh, he was just a kindly fellow. He was on the quiet side, and he played a trumpet in the band.
Oh.
And he was a great basketball player. I can remember one time, no, I was a cheerleader too.
Oh, really?
And I can remember at one time playing Washburn, you know, our feelings with Washburn. We had that little bit of animosity. I'm going to beat you. I'm better than you.
That goes back to the stealing the courthouse.
Oh, amen. Anyway, we had 2 points to make in order to beat Washburn. Jack got out on the court and he shot a basket. Perfect. We won the game.
Oh, he was the hero.
So
I should have brought it in. I do have a nice photo at home, of Jack and the basketball team in those days.
okay.
Were you the same age, you and Jack?
I'm 2.5 months older than Jack.
So you were in the same grade?
No.
No?
Jack, he was, was Jack born? He was born in Ashland, but his folks had a lot of business in Duluth in that they were kind of like a dray system where you would bring eggs up and you would bring vegetables or something back down into Bayfield. He did that type of work. And so he had family up there in Duluth too. So they lived quite a bit in Duluth. And Jack was transported from one little school to another. And in that process, he lost out on a couple of grades. They called them sub-schools.
It could have been in those days.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with it, but
Yeah, and so we should have been in the same grade, but he was 2 years behind me.
So Jack graduated in 40.
Well, what he did is he and Jeep Belangi. Do you recognize
Kenny?
that? No, it would be Kenny's older brother.
Okay, I do know the name.
Okay. Both of them went up to Superior and enlisted in service.
Okay.
So he was in service on graduation day, and they had his chair decorated with the flag.
Really?
and
What a
all for
story.
graduation, yes. And he was a ski trooper, 10th Mountain Division, and shipped over to Italy. And they landed at Naples and went through the hill country, which Naples, is at the foot of Italy. Went through the hill country on up to Milan. And up in the Milan area is the Po Valley. It is in the Po Valley area that Mussolini had his getaway cabin,
Okay.
which was a beautiful place.
Mm-hmm.
And also Hitler was at the Belvedere, Mount Belvedere,
Mm-hmm.
and it was Jack's bunch that captured Mount Belvedere.
Oh, really?
And because the tents, the ski troopers knew how to mountain climb, in the daytime when they would try to get up to the top of Mount Belvedere, they couldn't because the Germans at the top would shoot down
Mm-hmm.
and kill them as they came up.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, they decided that we will go up at nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
So they scaled the mountain at nighttime and surprised the Germans completely and captured it.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What year was that?
45, early 45, I think.
So Jack went in the service in 44, 45?
No, he went in, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to, what was I going to tell you about Mount Belvedere? Oh, going across to Mussolini's hideout.
Mm.
They also, the group before Jack's group went over and, of course, captured him and killed him.
Mm-hmm.
But Jack's group was able to go in after and go through this huge complex of his. And Jack at one time brought back a little drinking mug that was all silver. And I kept it, and I think I gave it to Janine, John's, or maybe I gave it to John. I gave it to one of the family anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's about what
So,
I remember.
yeah, so Jack's over at war. You're
I went to Detroit, Michigan then.
I knew that you had made a move there somewhere.
Yeah, Mother and I drove down. Daddy was already down there because my uncle Elbin England
Mm-hmm.
had been with the Detroit Cleveland Navigation Company for many, many years. And he said, Sebastian, Shirley's going to be going into college or do whatever she wants. He said, down in Detroit we have a wonderful business college that his wife, my Aunt Lillian, had gone to. And he said, maybe she'd be interested in that. And he said, if you come down, I'll give you a job with the DNC.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we did. Daddy went down, got a job. He worked on the, when the boats come in, this landing area where they unload and everything.
In the dry docks?
Dry docks. Daddy was in charge of that over
Okay.
the men who took the rubber, and I don't know, I remember Daddy mentioning rubber a lot off of these steamers.
Okay.
And so then I started Detroit Business College, and I loved it. It was wonderful. And when I graduated, I was hired right away by Monsanto Chemical Company.
Really?
I was a private secretary. I was in Monsanto. This was the plastics division of Monsanto, and the president, Mr. Gress, hired me to be his secretary.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there all the while.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jack, when he got out of service in 45, his folks were living in Chippewa Falls then.
Mm-hmm.
And they worked for one of the factories that made munitions and that.
Okay.
And so when he got out, I think he was out of, where did they muster them out at? In Wisconsin,
Camp McCoy?
Camp McCoy.
Okay.
And then he went over to his folks' place, stayed there for Christmas, got out the end of Christmas, came up to Bayfield, or Detroit, and stayed in Detroit with us until we were married 28 days later.
What day were you married?
We were married the 28th of January.
In
Detroit.
Yeah, in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
The year?
46.
1946.
Mm-hmm. And then came right up to Bayfield and started Johnson's Food Shop, which was Andy's building. the flood came, took it out.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, they weren't in Andy's building. They were in the building across the street that went out.
In the Turnquist building?
Turnquist building.
All right.
That went out. But when we came up, they had gotten into Andy's building, and the second flood came through, and I remember being in that and trying to help with getting everything out, and they took it out through. When you go into Andy's now, where all the carts are, that was one big bay window. We took everything out through that window.
Oh, boy.
What year was the second flood?
46. And there was a third one too, but I
Yeah, I
don't.
think in 51 or...
Yeah, something like that, Bob.
So there you were, hauling stuff out of bayfront windows. Where'd you haul it to?
I don't even remember, Bob.
Okay, in a truck, and there it was.
Yeah.
As a kid, I fondly remember, Bayfield in 1963. I'm 13 years old, and I looked across the street from where I lived there at 205 North, or 2nd Street, 2nd North 2nd. And there's the old Johnson's food shop, and how well I remember Blanche, Daryl Johnson, and your husband and you guys in those days.
Yeah.
Now, what building was that? That Johnson's
Xanadu now.
Xanadu.
Xanadu.
Yeah.
And
So that was 3 places they were in. The first one went in the flood, the second one was Andy's, and the third one was Xanadu's.
I can still see the sign hanging above the door there, and I can still see Blanche, when you
At the
walked in the
cash
door, there she
register.
was, and I can see the bread and the meat counters in the back, and
Yes.
I remember buying, when we got a little bit older, we'd go out to Rocky Island, and we'd have a couple nips at the tavern, and John Chapin and I, we'd call our husband up. He was probably ready to kill us. But we'd call Jack up, and Jack would always go down, and he'd cut the nicest steaks for us, and off we go to Rocky Island.
Good.
So that was a great story within
Yeah.
a story. So
That's great.
so the Johnsons, Jack's parents, owned that store,
Yes,
and then Jack worked in there for him.
that's right.
And was he the meat cutter?
Yes, he was.
So he was the butcher. And what did you do?
I did not do that much because then we decided to have the A&W Root Beer Drive-In.
Ah.
And so I was there. And in the early part, though, I was busy with my 2 children. And Blanche was there all the time, so and it wasn't that busy, so I was being mama.
yeah, and fine.
And who were your 2 children?
Well, my oldest one is Jackie Sebastian. She lives in Duluth, Knife River. And then John, John and Sharon down at the pier. That's
I
it.
remember when you lived up on top of Catholic Hill there.
That was, yes, I loved that place.
Yeah, and that's the old Anand place. I don't even know who's living there now, but
I don't either.
yeah,
That was a nice home.
that was.
But we sold that, and in order to still keep the pier going, or I should say, let's see, that would have been from A&W to pier.
Okay.
Because the pier went up in 71.
Okay. Oh boy, I can tell you hundreds of stories of being in the old A&W.
Yes.
The nickel root beers, the 20-cent hot dogs. Do you remember those days?
Oh, I really
That was the day of the car hops, and
But who owned that?
Leo Gagne owned it first. He on that corner, he and his wife had a little log cabin, and it was really an information booth as well as catering to trolling. And I think it was Harvey Nurse that started the Bayfield Trollers Association. And of course, Leo would take people out on the 2 boats that they had. They called them the 2 brothers, and his brother Ray had one. And so they were commercial fishing people, but to accommodate the tourists that came up who wanted to go fishing, they'd take them out. But it got so much for them that they started this association, and then private little trolling boats came in on the scene. And when Dad and I took over, there was as high as 36 trolling boats.
that's when Carl, your uncle Carl George England, Carl Moe, they bought that property at South Twin from Linus Jacobson.
Okay.
And right in that period in time, because that was the boom time.
That's right.
It really kicked off big, and there was a lot of trolling
Yes.
outside of Rocky Island and Brownstone.
And the fish were so big and beautiful. It was just a harvest, a wonderful harvest.
Yeah. So.
Well, back to the root beer stand, A&W. Now, so did you work in there?
Oh, morning, noon, and night. It was fun. It was hard, but it was fun.
You were pretty young and light on your feet then, so.
Yeah, then now it's a whole different story. But it was a fun place, and the kids, I can remember we had what we called dairy swirl. It was frozen ice milk, and I loved it. And of course, that's not very good for the waistline. Nevertheless, I'd sneak some every once in a while. And our car hops were little twiggies. They were so slim. They could eat that dairy swirl, and it would make me so mad. And they'd still stay so thin, you know.
Laugh at you.
Yeah.
So it was you could actually drive up, and it was a true
yeah.
drive-in.
It was a true
On that corner where
drive-in.
the pier is now.
Yes.
I can still see the
There was
jukebox.
enough room there, huh?
Oh,
To pull
there was,
cars in?
when that building was there was probably enough room in that lot for 10 cars, 12 cars.
Yeah, and then we parked on the back side too, where the bayfront is.
Was it only open in the summer, or?
Only in the summer, yeah.
Right.
In fact, not many cars came into Bayfield. Even in the summer, it was not that great. I can remember standing outside of the root beer stand, looking up the street up this way to Leon McCarty's house here, you know, and just waiting for the cars to come down, hoping they would come right down to the city dock, which normally they did.
Yeah.
People would see the lake and they would drive right down there, and then we would say, "Oh, please stop in," because we needed the business, you know.
So you bought the trolling business and that little, I remember that little log cabin pole building there. Did you add the rest of the E&W on
yes.
yourself?
You remember me telling you that out at the woodlot, Daddy had a shack, more or less, for the horses and for the fellows to come down and eat their lunch. And it was that little shack, the eating part, that Jack and John Hauser brought into Bayfield. John and Mary Hauser were partners with us in the A&W in the very beginning. Yes.
What a story.
So I think it was going on the 3rd year, and John's dad said, "John, that would be Dawson.
Yeah.
You have to help with the flowers and all of this." So they said, "Do you want to buy us out?" So that is what we did.
What year was that?
52,
1952.
53, I don't remember in that
Close enough.
area.
So you're there in the A&W business from that period in time to...
For 18 years.
Yeah.
And on the 20th year, you always had to redo your little spot and have it go with the A&W logo because it changed, you know.
Oh, I see.
And in order to keep your franchise going, you had to be with the logo as well. So we approached the city fathers and said we wanted to rebuild and to be all set for the 20th year because that's when it would expire. But the city fathers felt that black and orange was not nautical. That was the colors of A&W.
In 71.
And they said, "That is not nautical, I'm sorry." And then we had to have the cupola roof, and that was not allowed. So we told this news to A&W, and believe it or not, the vice president came up from, where was it, in California. I forgot where it was in California, their headquarters. He came up to speak with the city fathers, and neither one would give in to the other. So Dad and I said, "Okay, let it go." So that's when we put up the pier.
That was quite a building. I can see everything in there too.
Yes, Yes.
Were you scared? Was it a big risk when you went into that?
Yes. Oh yes, Bob. A big risk. Everything we had was collateral.
Yeah.
And so it was scary there for a few years. That's when I went out getting jobs elsewhere to help pay the mortgage, you know. I had to start with a job in Ashland, then to Washburn, then to Bayfield. Instead of getting a job in Bayfield, I couldn't get one, so I started in Ashland. And I worked at WATW, the radio station.
Huh.
And I did what you call the log, which is writing up all the ads. People would buy ads, you know, and want it proclaimed on the program, and so it was my job to do that. And you didn't, when you wrote up the log and you wrote an advertisement, it was, you wrote the words as they sound, not how they're spelled. And that was, I liked that though. It was fun. And when Friday arrived and you were off from Friday to Monday, you had to prepare a log. That means from 5 o'clock in the morning until they closed it. I think they closed at 8 or 9 at night.
Okay.
Everything the fellows said, you had to have it in print for them. So I would have to make the log up for Saturday and Sunday and Monday before I left Friday night. And that was a little challenging,
Oh,
I'll
boy,
tell
I
you.
bet.
Nevertheless, it was fun. You didn't have to worry about spelling or anything like that because you wrote the word out just as the word sounded, you know. And that was fun. That time they had Uncle Pete on
I remember that.
deal, and Warren Nelson, I believe it was. Anyway. Then from that WATW, I worked at the hospital. I was the night receptionist that took care of the switchboard. Also did the insurance. Did the dispatching of doctors, etc., and getting them a connection with an ambulance in case the ambulance people needed info for a particular person that was perhaps dying or something. That was fun too. I worked there for. I never could work very long because if the pier got busy, I had to be there. And so
Did you cook there and stuff too? And
yes, baked. Oh, baked. Anyway, I would go to work at the hospital at 11 o'clock at night, see, so I was free of the pier. And then I'd get off at 7 in the morning, come back at 7, start cooking. And I remember 2 times I went 48 hours before laying the head down. In fact, the last time I fell asleep at the wheel and by, where... I can't describe where it is. It's a wayside where you drive in and you can read this sign by
Madeline Island Overlook there, or
Some-
Schindler's Corner?
Schindler's Corner. Thank you. Bob.
Okay.
It was there.
No, that I'd like to do that, but I want to explore your life. Till now and then, probably throw you a few curveballs and
Yes.
that type of thing. So.
I'll pray on it.
Well, let's go back a little bit. There you were, driving along. You hadn't slept in 48 hours, and then you kind of hit the gravel a little
Hit
bit.
the gravel, and that woke me up enough to pull into this little wayside, put my head back on the seat there, and I was gone for about an hour. Woke up, came into the pier, and I went to bed.
Oh.
And I never let myself do that again because that was too scary. I realized that was foolish.
Yeah.
So,
You were juggling a lot in
Yeah.
those days.
Yeah.
Raising children,
Well, no, they were pretty well.
pretty well gone by
Yeah.
then. Okay.
Um,
When did John and you and Jack purchased it and you ran it for a while? What did you do to encourage your son John to get involved? Did you send? I know that he went to school and stuff. Did you give him the ultimatum? You're going to work here, or
No, we just let him do his thing. In fact, Dad and I had the place up for sale. And I can remember John and Sharon saw this and knew this, and we were about to sell it when John stepped up and he said, you know, I think I'd like to take a stab at it. So this is, then we told this John. He was a fellow that had a factory in St. Paul or Minneapolis. And do you remember the gift shop we had to the side of the...
Yep.
Yeah. He was sitting in there several days. I was not aware of it. At prime time or whatever time he wanted to, and just observed to
See the traffic flow.
Right, and so that's when he said, I want to buy this place. And that's
Now, what year would this have been?
probably, oh dear, I don't remember, probably 80.
1980.
I'm not sure.
Close
Or
enough.
closer, I don't remember, to tell you the truth.
Close enough. We're getting into that period in time of 1980, 1979. Who cares?
Yeah.
So was the pier open year-round then?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And what other restaurants were in town at the time that you were competing with?
There was Grunky's, and the hotel was going, but the hotel did not, they opened up a year after us. I think it was 72 they opened, and we were open in 71. What other restaurant? Oh, there was always a community lunch. You remember community
Sig and
lunch?
Ma.
Yes, yes.
Where was that?
Where Blue Water or Big Water is now. I think that was it.
And who ran community lunch?
Irene,
Sig Bergson.
no, he said, oh, community lunch, yeah.
Yeah.
Sig Bergson, she was the owner. And Margaret, or Margaret. I don't know if how she tied in there with Sig, but they were two wonderful cooks, two wonderful ladies. They always had a New Year's Day dinner there, I think they did.
Smorgasbord for the whole community.
Yeah.
Remember that? You go up there and eat all you want.
Wasn't that New Year's Day?
Either that or Thanksgiving. So one of those.
One of those
Yeah.
times, yeah. That's how it was.
How many people do you think you've employed in your
You
life
know,
here?
I've often thought how fun it would be to have a car hop party. Oh, that would be so fun if I could get everybody together. And to tell you the truth, can't even remember all of them anymore. They were such great kids. I just love them all.
Yeah, I remember Pincy Murado being a car hop, Janie Frostman, the Chauvet girls, Gail Badine,
Yes.
Kinney kids.
And they used that money to buy their class rings or their class pictures. So they told me this is what we need our money. Karen Pulaski was one too.
Sure. Just tons of them.
And Sheila Davis, do you remember? She,
I know of her.
yeah. Oh, and Carol Myers and, just so many beautiful
Paula
kids.
Johnson was
Yes, Paula.
there. Just tons of kids that I remember. Any girl that went to Bayfield school up there, I think always seemed to wind up car hopping
Yeah.
or they'd work behind that
The counter.
counter there. I can remember all the music, that jukebox going all the time.
Yes.
People coming off the ferry boats, we'd sit in there watch them, and I could take you right to where I sat right there, right now.
So many beautiful people.
Now, what was Jack's role there in that?
Well, he was at the store,
Right.
and then he'd come down to the red beer stand. And it was wonderful. It all worked out fine. Lots of hard work.
Put in a lot of hours.
Lot of hours, yes, I should say.
How was your mother-in-law to work with? Blanche
Well-
Barrow Johnson. I remember her very well. Give me some insight on Blanche.
Oh, she was quite a lady. She had her method of everything, and it was really pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
But she liked it her way, She taught me a lot. She taught me some of the good German dishes that they were German too, and that the family liked to eat. I can't remember them offhand now.
Sure.
But no, she was a good lady. But like I say, it had to be her way.
She was pretty disciplined in her thinking, maybe. Would be a good way to put it.
Yeah, she was a
Well, I
good
heard
lady.
she used to holler at Jack back there in the back of the store. Is
Oh
that-
yeah, that's true. And Norman, of course, he was quiet. And
Jingling?
no, Norman,
Okay.
that's Jack's dad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I never did
He
meet
was,
him.
yeah, he was a very quiet fella.
Mm-hmm.
And when they had the flood in '46, he passed away in '47.
He
And
did.
Blanche always said it's a flood that made him pass on because he had a heart attack, and he'd already been through, lost completely one flood, in the
Sure.
Turnquist building,
That's all he could endure.
lost everything, and now a repeat. It probably was so stressful that it may have. Well, I believe God takes us when He wants us, but
Yeah,
that stress was very high for Norman.
sure. And then there was Jingling.
Oh, Jingling, yes. Our happy Jingling. Yeah, he
Now, who was he?
that would be Jack's uncle, Uncle Harold, we called him.
Mm-hmm.
And the townsfolk called him Jingling.
Mm-hmm.
And he liked his booze pretty well. And I can remember but he was a happy drunk, shall we say. He was not one to cause problems or anything. He just loved everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember Jack saying, well, now, Jing, come up for Thanksgiving, but if you're drunk, you stay away. And we'd have him every Thanksgiving, or we'd have him every holiday because he didn't have anybody to go to. And he was very kindly to us.
He was a good electrician, too. I don't think
Oh.
people knew that. He had a bum hand, I think, that happened.
Well, you know that electric station that's up on a pole right outside of Maggie's?
Yep.
Well, it's at that station. Something happened, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and in Maggie's place was Junior Yeska's.
Mhm.
His mother and dad owned it.
Ed.
Ed, that's right. Something happened, and Jingling said, well, I can fix that. So he went down to the utilities place where Omer Nelson was,
Power
in that
company
power
there?
company.
Mm-hmm.
Turned the switch off, and he was going to climb the pole and fix it. And I'm sure he would have been able to, too,
Mm-hmm.
because he was that versatile in electricity. And so he did this, and see, it's Sunday afternoon, climbed the pole, and while he was up there fixing it, somebody went down to City Hall and saw the power off.
Oh.
And Harold had not left a note saying, I turned it off because I'm fixing at such and such a spot.
Huh. Huh.
So the man that saw this put the electricity on. And Harold took over 2,000 volts of electricity through his body. It went
Ooh.
through his left side completely,
Mhm.
so that his left leg never really ever healed
I
up.
remember the limp.
And his hearing was damaged, and of course his hand was damaged. He was lucky to be alive. He was in the hospital over a year trying to get everything under control.
He lived in that house, if I remember. He lived, where the Korsbergs live on the corner coming into town?
That's right.
Right where the Pierpont place is, in that area, there was
That's
a
right.
big gray colored house there.
That's right.
And I remember him living there. And I think the Keffers lived there after him or something like that.
I think you're right, Bob. I'd
Yeah.
forgotten about
Jake and Tweety were in there for a
Yes.
little while. And
Yes. Well, anyway, that was Uncle Harold. He
Yeah.
was a wonderful, good-hearted fella. Just he had a little problem, that's all.
Well, we're
Well, it was great. You didn't banish him. You
No.
still kept him in the fold.
Yeah, he was a
Yeah.
good guy. So I guess that about covers it, maybe. Bob.
Well, that covers the pier, but then all of a sudden, lo and behold, I see this beautiful new structure down there now, and
Isn't that lovely?
it is the greatest.
Yeah.
And I know there's been we should probably talk to John one of these days
Yes,
too.
you should.
But I know the pier was. How long were you in the pier? When did you sell to John, or?
Over a period of time, and I think Dad and I left in. I don't know when we left now. It just seems like you gradually leave.
Wasn't an exact date. It was just
No,
going.
I know that.
In the 80s, this would be?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So John's been there a good 20 years on his
Oh
own
yes. Mm-hmm.
now. 89.
So what did what did you and Jack do when you sold out?
Well, we went out to Bayview. We have a spot out there. We've had it since 1952.
Mm-hmm.
And so we bought we bought a big trailer and took it out there. And they had to cut the trees down and all of that and landscape it. And Daddy did a lot of landscaping. They brought the trailer in, but see, Jack had a bad heart too. He'd had it for about a year.
Well, how did that start anyway? Did he just all of a sudden one day have a bad heart, or did he have a heart attack, or?
The year before, he had heart problems. I know that I had to take him over quick like a couple of times, and the last time I took him over, it was in the process of being a heart attack, so that they were monitoring it all the while. He recuperated from that, and then of course did too much out at the lake. Like I'm saying, landscaping and all of that. So excited to be out there, you know. And he was only there 6 months and was gone.
Isn't that something? What year? When did he die?
86. No, 89.
1989. Jack passed
And
away.
where exactly is this place?
Sioux River Flats.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I explain.
Near the mouth of the Onion River there.
Bayview Park Road. There's a sign there that says Bayview Park Road.
And is that still in the family, or is that?
Yes, the kids have it. It's Jackie's and John's now.
Yeah. But so after Jack died, then what did you do? Tough time.
We know you're a volunteer at Bayfield Heritage, but
I guess I helped the kids once in a while, or I don't really know what I did. Not much of anything, John.
Because in 1989, you would have been 66 or 67 years old.
Yeah.
Retired.
Yeah, we'd gone on some nice trips together. I told you about Mount Belvedere in Italy. We were able to go back there before Jack passed on, which I'm glad for. I can remember when we got there, we had to climb this one hill to get up to the exact spot of Belvedere that they captured. And one lady fell and broke her leg, and Jack was using a cane at that time. And I can remember him trying with all his might to get to the top, and finally he made it. And I have a picture of that. That was what made everything, you know. And then we had a church service at the top of Mount Belvedere. It was a Catholic mass. And there were many people there that attended from the United States. It was just so impressive, and I can remember.
who would you say would have been one of your better friends in life? Who did you enjoy being around, other than family? Did you have any best friends? Or?
I know I have always been with lots of friends. And as for a very best friend, I guess the very best friend I ever had in life would be that Dorothy Gouch I told you back about. And since then, it's been everybody's my friend, my best friend, really.
Yeah, I know that you're spoken very highly of, like with Ruthie Moon, and
Oh, she's
you know,
my classmate.
Yeah, she's a hoot and a half to
Oh,
begin
yes.
with, and she's not doing very well this day and age, I guess
No,
either.
I
So
saw her a couple weeks ago, and she's, when you talk to her on the phone, if you've talked to her before, when she answers, she'll say moons.
yeah,
She's still doing that so well and
mm-hmm.
doing as best she can.
Mm-hmm. What are some other businesses in Bayfield that you remember?
Well, I remember Bruner's drugstore very well, and
And that would be where?
the Turnquist building.
In the Turnquist building. Okay.
And see, upstairs, my Aunt Helen had a beauty salon.
Helen Turnquist.
No, Helen Sales.
Helen Sales. Okay.
And she had Uppie O'Connell as the lady that cosmetologist and the one that gave the permanence and that. And
So
then,
the former Ruth Lambert, right?
right, and then they hired Beulah Carlson.
Beulah, Carly Carlson's wife.
Yes.
Oh boy.
And that I remember.
Were they-
That was upstairs above Bruner's.
Yeah. Okay. So
Drugstore.
Uppie's there and Beulah Carlson's there.
Mm-hmm.
I often wonder what Uppie did, in her
Yeah,
life.
she did that many years, and then Aunt Helen died, of course, and then it was Uppie's. I don't know how long Uppie kept it going.
Did the drugstore have a soda fountain in it?
Not that one, but you went into Ole Holmes, Xanadu, and there was a soda fountain. And I can remember Harold Noring was behind the soda fountain, as well as Johnny Harrison.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I knew Harold Noring real well. We called him Snut.
Snut.
Snut. And I'd go in there and get a Coke. And every once in a while, he'd see it getting down. He'd pull it over and refill it for me.
I've got a photo of my mother working.
Marie.
Yeah.
Dear Marie.
Yeah, in that store where she's kind of like, like that.
Okay.
But
What did she do, Bob?
in her high school days there, she worked at that spot, and she also worked for Anna Myers in a
sure.
drugstore there.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Fritz
Fritz
Myers
Myers.
and Anna, yeah. Do you remember the Myers family in in the other place at all, or?
Oh, well, I remember one side of the building was the bar, and the other side was the restaurant. And Harriet worked in the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And in the bar, I think it was Wally Cease that was their bartender.
Harriet is Harriet Hagen Johnson.
Johnson.
For the record there. So.
Yeah, I remember that. And of course, I remember old Al Lodel and his wife Maggie.
Mm-hmm.
And then next door was Burtness Hardware. And
Was that
and
Britt Burtness in there then, or?
yes, and Annette and Annette Johnson
And Leonard.
Leonard,
Mm-hmm.
their son Mark, and then was Uncle Henry's coal distribution building, and then Morty's, and then was a little tiny restaurant, just so small, that was hamburgers only. And I can remember working in there for, who was the lady that was there? Barningham, I believe.
Vern Barningham's wife or something like that?
Oh, goodness, I can't even remember. But I remember they had a stove in the back, and you fried the hamburgers in a frying pan on the stove. I think I worked there one winter.
Is there a pool hall? You remember when the pool hall used to be there?
Yeah, then was Morty's, and then was the pool hall.
All right. Was it Smith's pool hall way
Yeah.
back in those days? Because that's what it was when I was a kid.
I'm not sure if that was Ed or Bill Smith.
I think their father. Oh, I'll have to think about it now.
I think it was Bill Smith.
Yeah, Bill. Yeah. Not Ed. Ed wasn't in there. That
Yeah,
was it.
okay.
But I can still see Bill Smith's dad in there when I was a kid. Because we used to.
That was Roy Smith,
Roy Smith, yeah.
because they were out in the town of Russell, too.
Yeah, they were.
And she was one of the originators, along with Mother, for the Sunnyside Club that I told you about.
Oh, really? I can still see her right now. Who are some of the other originators of the Sunnyside Club?
Let's see. The Feldmeyers, that I know, and Smiths and Kelly's, Mrs. Effie. They called her Effie Kelly, and the Petersons,
Elsie Peterson?
Elsie Peterson, and Mrs. Gorman. Oh, who else?
Mrs. William? You said it before. But I know who you're talking
Okay. That's all I can
Probably the Nelsons. There were some Nelsons out
Yeah.
there too.
Mrs. John Nelson and a Mrs. Heck. That's
You did really, really well there.
But that was fun for the ladies, and it was fun for the school kids after to munch off all the goodies they had.
Well, Shirley, with all the work you were doing, what did you and Jack do for fun?
Well, I'll tell you, there wasn't much fun, to tell you the truth. You were so exhausted that there was no time for fun. It was go to bed to rejuvenate for morning again. Oh, yes.
Well, you've had a wonderful recollection of your life there. What a treat to be able to listen and talk to you here today. This is just fantastically interesting, to me. So.
Well, I
Well,
don't...
Shirley, you've seen Bayfield change
Yes.
dramatically.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about what those changes were for you as you...
Well, I think the greatest change was the cutting down of the trees on Main Street. When you would drive into Bayfield in the olden days, you had all these beautiful trees, just coming down almost on Main Street, and then to see the lake in front. I can't tell you how thrilling that was. But then the trees grew old and diseased. They had to be cut down. And to me, that made Bayfield a little bare.
Yeah.
I remember.
And then, of course, with the Turnquist building down, that was heartbreaking. But of course, there's more people in the world, and so they are just being kind of pushed up to us. And that's how our tourists, or our guests, I should say, coming into Bayfield, they are just getting here unbeknown. I don't think many of them even planned to come here. And then they see this beautiful Bayfield. We used to call ourselves beautiful Bayfield. And so many times I've gone down on the East End dock in the afternoons to just watch all the activities. I mean, as of late, the last 3 years that I've been here. And to see all of that activity, many cars pulling up beside me will either come out and come over to me, I suppose because this is such an old lady, maybe she's a old timer here, so they will ask me questions. And they will say, I've never been here before, and I'm so blown away. Or we drove through here last year, and it was so beautiful we couldn't get it out of our mind, so we felt we had to come back and just check it out again. That's so thrilling to hear.
I got a fun one for you. We know that Father Chevel came from La Pointe in 1871 to Bayfield and started the Franciscan Order of the Holy Family Church. And I can still see as a little kid the rummage sales and stuff down in the basement and stuff like that. Tell me a little bit about the Catholic Church and the people and how what role it played in your life and stuff like that.
I didn't know all of that because it was Presbyterian.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you about that.
Have you been no, not the real, but you've been a Catholic for quite a few years, I would
Number
guess.
of years, yes.
Yes. Tell me a little bit about that church and the people that you associated with in the church.
Well, I guess when Father Meinrad is the first priest that I remember of. In fact, I think he is the one that baptized me. And from then on, it was, I can't remember, Bob. It's
Yeah.
just that I didn't do that much. Maybe as a little kid, I would have grown with it, but I can remember of having a lot of dinners down in the basement at Holy Family.
Mm-hmm.
Many dinners, and I can remember of my daughter Jackie being May Queen at Holy Family because we just lived across the way on Second Street there,
Mm-hmm.
Catholic Hill,
Mm-hmm.
and getting her all dressed up for being May Queen.
What was May Queen?
Oh, this is always in May, and it's honoring Mother Mary, of course. But you
Okay.
have a little veil, and you're all dressed up in reverence to Mother Mary. And this is quite an eventful affair.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, John was at that time the youngest little server they ever had, and he served for Father Regis. You
Okay.
probably remember that
name I remember.
Regis, yeah.
Did your kids go to the Catholic school?
Oh yes, until freshman year in high school.
Right. Tell us a little bit about the nuns as teachers, and what if John was sitting here right now and Jackie were sitting right here, what were they telling you about their learning experience at the Catholic school?
I think they did really well. I know that when I came from DePadua and came to Bayfield, I had algebra in freshman year, and the next step was geometry. And Bayfield didn't even offer that until you were a senior.
Okay.
So I had to go in with the seniors to continue the credits for math.
Okay.
So I think they are a little bit ahead of the public school in that they really concentrate on a subject and drill it in them so you do go away learning. So I was proud of them for that, and they did well.
I heard that the nuns are pretty tough cookies if you, in the classroom there.
I've heard that, but that didn't happen to my
Yeah.
kids.
And I don't mean that negatively. I just mean that.
Spank them on the hands.
Well, maybe if that, but I mean, but when they pointed their finger, the kid knew they better behave.
Mind. Yeah.
I had some friends that went to Catholic school too. When they got to public school, they got over there, they were confused. And the reason is when you were in Catholic school, you had to raise your hand and stand up or something. And everybody over at the public school just raised their hand and life went on. So it took them a little while to adapt to it.
That's true.
Yeah. I remember the midnight masses. I had a girlfriend that was Catholic in high school. And what a wonderful experience that was.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah. That to me was, and this was like in 1966, 67. It was awesome to watch.
I can remember now a 40-hour devotion, and that was when you went all night long. And I can remember of going into church I offered to go in at take the 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock attendance there.
Okay.
And I would go in and pray at that time of night. And then you had to stay there until somebody came in and took the 3 o'clock shift to 4. And so you went. I liked that because you were quiet, you were all alone, and you could concentrate good on God and all that special.
It was peaceful. And were you ever a deacon in the church, or did you ever serve in the capacity of that type of thing, or something like that?
No, too busy, Bob.
Yeah, you just didn't have time. But sometimes, people can even seem to feel it a little bit.
Yeah, you should. But I failed. I did not.
Don't look at it that way. Just look at it as like you put it in the offering plate later to make up for it or something.
Right, that's right.
So Shirley, how did you feel when the Catholic school finally closed?
I guess, let's see, when it finally closed.
About 87.
Yeah, I think that it was through Sister Phyllis being so loaded down with all of it that I think we were kind of relieved that it had closed. And there weren't that many students going then. They were all going to the public school then. but the few that were there, it seemed to me Sister Phyllis took care of the whole thing, and it was just too much, you know. And each year they were losing students. So what else would you do?
Yeah, you had to make a move.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, I think that's about maybe it.
that's good.
I
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Well, we picked your mind as best we could.
Let's have another cup of coffee.
Yeah, okay. I'll tell you what, I'm getting wired here on this coffee. I'll be here till midnight
Well,
with you
then have
talking.
another
We'll have a
cookie.
Yeah.
cookie. Thank you so
Thank-
much, Shirley.
Yeah,
Thank
wonderful,
you.
wonderful
This
job you
was
did.
so kind of you. Thank you.
no.
I appreciate it.
Well, it was all you and Ernie's dad, I guess.
Yeah.
You rolling?
Yeah, I'm rolling. Okay.
Okay.
Let's go back a little bit here, Shirley, and talk a little bit about the prostitution ring in Hurley and how it had an effect on Bayfield.
Well, between Ironwood and Hurley, they had a tunnel underground so that when the federal men came in, the girls could go through this tunnel to the other little city, which is in the other state, you know. And so, but at that time, they would call Daddy because he was policeman at that time, and Bayfield was filled with slot machines in the drugstore, in the post office, all over town. And
Well, who owned those slot machines?
the city owned them.
The city owned them.
And our mayor, who was Tony Lindquist, is who allowed it. But nevertheless, it was illegal. And so, like I said, the people in Ironwood or Hurley, I don't know which town would call Daddy and tell him, okay, get the money out of the slot machines all over Bayfield and then put the canvas hood over it and turn it to the wall so that it's a dead issue. And Daddy would do that and get the money and bring the money down to the big safe in the pavilion
And the lakefront.
on the lakefront, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that safe is around anymore or not.
Might be in there.
Nevertheless, Daddy put the money in there, and that's what the city used, that money, to build up East End Park. It was always a little outlet there, but it was made bigger, and the rocks put around it. Anyway, that's what the city used the money for.
Didn't Henry Walksmith give that piece of property to the city of Bayfield?
Could be, I don't know.
And I think it was right around 1937 is
Could
when
be.
he handed that over to the city.
Shirley,
Wonderful
so,
story.
so the feds were on the way. Is that the
That's
idea?
right.
So when they got to town, all they found was
Empty,
These.
turned to the wall slot
Yeah,
machines
oh, we
that
don't
weren't
use
used. That's something that was never used, you know.
That's not ours, type of thing.
That's right.
Or what slot machines? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful story, thanks.
Yes,
good. I'm glad we got that.
That's a good one.
their East End Park. Well, not nice to know that you got it from slot machine money, but nevertheless, they used it for a good purpose and to the benefit of all Bayfielders.
It's a wonderful thing about history is you can talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. It doesn't make any difference as long as it's true.
Uh-huh.
Then it's it is what it is. It makes
You know, before you came up, I said a little prayer that I would speak the truth.
it.
I did. Because sometimes I can get carried off into no land,
Well,
you know.
a little bit of embellishment never hurt any story. So, isn't that right, John?
That's right.
Okay.